To truly understand the transformation of El Salvador, you must first comprehend the depth of the nightmare that gripped it for generations. For over 30 years, the narrative of this small Central American nation was written not by its government, but by its gangs. The story began in the aftermath of the brutal Salvadoran Civil War, a conflict that tore the social fabric apart and sent waves of refugees fleeing north. In the streets of Los Angeles, young Salvadorans formed gangs for protection, creating the infamous Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, and its rival Barrio 18. When the United States began mass deportations of convicted criminals in the 1990s, it effectively exported these sophisticated, hyper-violent criminal structures back to a country utterly unequipped to handle them. The gangs took root in impoverished neighborhoods where the state was absent, offering a twisted sense of belonging and identity to a generation of youth neglected in the war's aftermath. They evolved into de facto governments, imposing their own brutal laws through a reign of terror. Extortion, known as La Renta, became a ubiquitous tax on life itself, levied on bus drivers, shopkeepers, and street vendors. A refusal to pay was a death sentence. Murders were public and grotesque, designed to send a message. Gangs controlled entire territories, dictating who could enter or leave. At its horrifying peak in 2015, El Salvador recorded 103 homicides for every 100,000 people, making it the most violent peacetime country on the planet. To put that in perspective, a nation of roughly 6.5 million people was experiencing a 9/11 scale loss of life every single year. The state was powerless, its previous attempts at crackdowns, politely named mano dura or iron fist policies, proving to be clumsy and ineffective, often sweeping up innocent youth and merely serving as a finishing school for criminals who graduated from crowded prisons, more networked and radicalized than before. This was the status quo, a seemingly unbreakable equilibrium of fear, until one weekend in March 2022 shattered any remaining illusions of control. The catalyst for the radical change was a display of brazen, catastrophic violence that finally broke the nation's patience. On the weekend of March 25, 2022, following what analysts believe was a breakdown in secret negotiations between gang leaders and the government, the country plunged into a 72-hour paroxysm of bloodshed. Gangs unleashed coordinated attacks across the nation, killing 87 people. Saturday, March 26th, stands as the single deadliest day in Salvadoran history since the end of the Civil War, with 62 murders. The streets, for a moment, belonged entirely to the criminals. This was not just a crime wave, it was an open challenge to the sovereignty of the state, a demonstration that the gangs could switch the country's violence on and off at will. The public's fear curdled into a furious, overwhelming demand for action, any action. President Nayib Bukele, a millennial leader who had risen to power on a platform of disruption against the old political parties, seized the moment. He went before the legislature, which he controlled, and demanded extraordinary powers. With swift and near-unanimous support, the Legislative Assembly declared a state of exception. This was not a minor policy adjustment. It was the deliberate legal suspension of key constitutional rights. The state suspended the need for arrest warrants, extended pre-trial detention indefinitely, abolished the right to a private lawyer, and allowed for mass trials where evidence could be presented in secret. The police and military were unleashed with one simple directive: arrest anyone suspected of gang affiliation. The rule of law, as it was conventionally understood, was temporarily shelved in the name of public order. The security forces fanned out across gang-controlled neighborhoods, often acting on anonymous tips or crude tattoos. Within the first 7 months, over 55,000 people were detained. The arrests were not surgical, they were a blunt force trauma to the criminal ecosystem. The message was absolute: the state was now the most powerful gang in the territory. But a crackdown of this scale creates a logistical problem of epic proportions. Where do you put 1% of your entire adult population? The answer, conceived in the feverish months following the state of exception, was a monument to penal dystopia. A structure designed not for rehabilitation, but for permanent, incapacitating containment. On a remote, barren plot of land at the base of the San Vicente volcano in Tecoluca, the government began constructing the Terrorism Confinement Center, known as CECOT. It opened in January 2023, a stark geometric complex visible from satellite imagery. Its statistics are mind-numbing, a capacity for 40,000 human beings, making it the largest prison in the Americas. It is a fortress designed to be inescapable and unsustainable for life, surrounded by 2 rings of 9-meter-high concrete walls, electrified fences, 19 guard towers, and a perimeter of gravel designed to crunch loudly underfoot. Inside, the conditions are meticulously engineered to erase identity and crush spirit. New arrivals have their heads shaved and are issued identical white shorts and t-shirts. They are led to one of 256 massive cells, each built to house an average of 156 men. The cells are smooth concrete bunkers, lit by artificial lights that blaze 24 hours a day, eliminating any natural circadian rhythm. There are no mattresses, only bare metal bunks stacked 4 high. Inmates are granted exactly 30 minutes outside their cell per day, for a rushed session in a concrete yard. There is no visitation, not from family, not from lawyers. There are no phones, no educational programs, no recreation. Meals are bland slop eaten with hands. The only reading material provided is a Bible. The official stance from the Minister of Justice is unequivocal. These inmates will never be released back into society. CECOT is not a correctional facility. It is a human warehouse, a bottomless pit, where the state intends to bury the problem of gang violence forever. The government proudly tours journalists through its corridors, showcasing the dehumanizing order as a feature, not a bug. The ultimate symbol of the new Iron Peace. The human cost of this peace is a sprawling tragedy of errors, overreach, and shattered lives playing out behind the walls of CECOT and other swollen detention centers. With arrests conducted largely on suspicion, based on tattoos, neighborhood, or anonymous accusations, the sweep of 75,000 detainees inevitably captured thousands of innocent people. Stories abound of construction workers, delivery drivers, and students snatched from their homes or workplaces, their frantic families presenting employment records and school certificates to deaf ears. The legal process offers little recourse. Defendants are tried in mass hearings, sometimes dozens at a time, where they are denied the ability to see the evidence against them or confront their accusers. Judges operating under political pressure and the overwhelming public mandate for the policy hand down staggering sentences. Centuries-long terms for minor or unproven associations are common. The prison system, strained far beyond its limits, has become a petri dish for disease and abuse. Reports from human rights organizations detail severe overcrowding, lack of medical care, and torture. Families of the detained are often themselves extorted, charged a monthly fee for the upkeep of their imprisoned loved ones. This is the dark underbelly of the statistics, the necessary collateral damage in the government's eyes. For every brutal gang enforcer locked away, there is a wrongfully accused father, a son caught in the wrong place, whose life is now forfeit to maintain the perception of total security. The state acknowledges some mistakes, but frames them as the unfortunate but acceptable price for saving the nation. This trade-off, liberty for security, due process for peace, is the central brutal calculus of the Bukele model. Yet, within El Salvador, this calculus is not just accepted, it is celebrated with near-religious fervor. President Nayib Bukele, with his signature backwards ball cap and sleek social media presence, enjoys an approval rating hovering around 90%, making him arguably the most popular elected leader on Earth. The reason is simple and visceral: it worked. The homicide rate did not just dip, it plummeted. From that hellish peak of over 100 per 100,000, it has fallen to a stunning 2.4 in 2024, a rate lower than Switzerland or Canada. The psychological impact on daily life is transformative. Where parents once kept their children indoors after dark, parks and plazas are now full at night. Bus drivers no longer pay a daily war tax to gangs. Small businesses are opening in neighborhoods once considered no-go zones. The pervasive grinding fear that defined Salvadoran life for decades has largely evaporated. For the vast majority of citizens who were victims, not perpetrators of gang violence, the state of exception is not an abstract debate about civil liberties. It is a life-saving intervention. They see the images from CECOT not as a human rights scandal, but as satisfying justice, a long overdue humiliation of their tormentors. This overwhelming popular mandate has allowed Bukele to consolidate power in ways that alarm international observers. Removing term limits, replacing judges, and controlling the legislature. He has framed the struggle not as a political contest, but as a literal war for the nation's soul, with himself as the indispensable commander. In the eyes of Salvadorans, he is the man who did the impossible, who traded a dysfunctional democracy for a functional society. Their support is the bedrock upon which the entire controversial experiment is built. The success, however brutal, has not gone unnoticed. Across Latin America, nations grappling with their own metastasizing crises of violence and weak governance are looking to San Salvador with a mix of horror and envy. The Bukele model is becoming a potent political export. In Ecuador, where drug cartels have turned the country into a war zone, President Daniel Noboa has explicitly channeled Bukele's rhetoric, building his own austere prisons and declaring an internal armed conflict. In Honduras and Peru, politicians are rising in the polls by promising their own versions of the state of exception. They are tapping into the same deep well of public desperation and impatience with liberal democracy's perceived failures. The model offers a seductively simple narrative: a strong, uncompromising leader using unshackled state power to crush criminality, delivering rapid, tangible results. It bypasses the slow, messy, and often corrupt processes of institution building, judicial reform, and social investment. For populations terrorized by daily violence, the promise of immediate safety is infinitely more compelling than a lecture on constitutional norms. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown useful, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dives made simple. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. See you in the next one.